Reddit, what is your worst moment of I probably shouldn't hang out with these people? After one friend got a rather large tattoo of the monster symbol on his arm and another beat his mom up for cigs and drug money, I kinda stepped back from them. I never understood people getting tattoos of the Monster Energy drink symbol, or even wearing Monster sweatshirts. I place it right up there with tap out apparel. For some freaking stupid reason, they feel extreme for drinking concentrated sugar that tastes like crap. They broke into my house, got incredibly drunk, trashed the place, set fire to a trash can on my freaking roof, vomited on my bed, which then cascaded onto the floor, and then left it all for me to clean up. When I told them to frick off and never contact me again, they responded that I'd be missing out on good times. Right. It sounds so elegant when you say the vomit cascaded. I was leaving a store with 3 of my friends. One friend and I got into my car and were about to leave when another announced that he had to pee. He then climbed into the back of my other friend's car and found a 1-gallon Ziploc bag and started urinating into it. The owner of that car was in the driver's seat laughing his butt off when he proceeded to pull a jar of Jif out of the glove box and start eating it with his bare hands. All of this was happening in the parking lot of a store that had a large glass window in the front, so that everyone in the store could see them. The store also had a restroom. Man, this is the weirdest story in this thread. When I was in high school I used to go over to this older guy's house because he would sell me weed. He used to blow weed smoke in his baby's face. He also fed his baby chicken fingers and french fries every day. Whoa, this is just so very depressing. Being with these people was like being in an emotionally abusive relationship. They talked about me behind my back, ignored me, talked over me, and went places without bothering to ask if I wanted to go. We lived in a small town and social opportunities were limited, so I put up with it longer than I should have. We were all in our mid-20s and it was like being in middle school again. After a while I started thinking the problem was me, and that I was just a socially awkward freak. When I realized how terrible I felt about myself, I knew it was time to cut them out of my life and I have never really looked back. Life is much better without them in it. This was my life for 4 years. I was a nerdy loner as a kid and through most of high school, so when I was accepted into a group in my last year of high school, I couldn't have been happier. I thought that talking about me behind my back, ignoring me, and forgetting to invite me to places was just how friendship was. Last night I witnessed a guy I've known for years beating up his girlfriend. Needless to say, I'm never speaking to him again. One girl took out a knife and cut her palm and smeared it on a leaf. She's Wiccan and wanted to merge energies with the earth. When he swerved his car to hit a raccoon and her cubs while they were crossing the road, then he stopped and got out of the car to ran back to jump on the wounded mother like he was on a trampoline, followed by kicking stomping at the cubs as they scurried for their lives. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. He was laughing the whole time. Freaking psychopath. We were 8-10 miles from our town, so I wasn't about to just walk home. Country road and no cell phones back then. I told him it was fricked up, rode with him to a mutual friend's house, and haven't talked to the guy since. You'll probably see him mentioned in the news someday. I invited her to sleep over and around 11 PM she decided she was bored, so she called her mom and screamed at her to drop off $100 for lunch money. She then told me her friend had texted her and asked her to pick up coke and that she was going to meet him, and then she disappeared into the night. Unrelated incident, but I was talking about how I was sad because my kitten was missing and she basically told me I had no right to be sad about it because she'd gotten an abortion a month prior. The friend is gone but the kitten came back. When they'd had a few serious car accidents after driving while on acid or drunk etc and didn't stop, they just laughed about it. That's when I realized they didn't give a frick about themselves or anyone else. Driving on acid is almost the single most irresponsible thing I can imagine anyone doing. That's incredible. Pressured me to do C and try M. I didn't go near them again, which is good considering that half of them got expelled. A line a day keeps the doctor away, also keeps your house clean. They called me in treatment and told me there was a case of my favorite beer and a blunt with my name on it waiting for me when I get out. That's fricked, man. I hope you've gotten better. I was walking home from high school with an old primary school friend of mine and she said let's go throw stones at the gypsies. I didn't hang out with her so much after that. I moved to New York for college and found out about a year later that a kid I met briefly at a party, Kevin, who I had mutual friends with, was living here as well. I didn't have too many friends yet, and I figured it would be cool to hang out. Admittedly, I knew he was kind of insane but in a good way, and since I'd never really hung out with him outside of that one party I didn't know the extent of his insanity and the people he'll surround himself with. He had run away from home. I was 19 and he was 23 for reference, and he was staying with two people he met in the 2 months that he had been there at the time. A sleazy guy well into his 40s, I'll call him Nick, and Kevin's new girlfriend who was probably about 26-27, Katie. Long story short, in this one night, I realized his group of friends was no good after Nick kept making creepy advances on me repeatedly. He was so persistent and the fact that he was old enough to be my father was disturbing. Katie shoplifted hundreds of dollars of merchandise from a Dwayne Reed to resell I guess in some kind of retail scam, which I didn't even realize was going on until after the fact and it was later explained to me that Katie is a career criminal. Then we took Katie to an underground BDSM operation so she could interview for a position. Also, the entire time, Katie was violently high on H and kept lashing out at my friend Kevin for being a piece of crap. At the end of the night we end up at a rooftop lounge so Nick can do some business and to this day I don't know what that means. In between meetings with these random people, Nick came back to me with a pocket full of pills and asked me if I wanted some and then wanted to know if I wanted to be with him sexually, to which I responded heck no and quickly left. Fun fact, I was really drunk that night and when I was walking back home to my dorm I got hit by a car. Still wasn't the worst thing that happened that day. You know you've had a rough day when getting hit by a car was an overall improvement. I got pretty bad food poisoning after eating a roast beef sandwich at his house. He told me later that it was 3 months old, which wasn't very much fun. His parents were also caterers, so I made a mental note to never order catering from them. I once had a roommate that claimed to be in the folk nation. A friend and I were hanging out on my front porch. A car pulled up and started yelling at my friend about him owing some money. My friend was a bit of a loose cannon. He grabbed an unopened beer bottle from a cooler, ran up to the car, and threw the beer through the front windshield. The car sped off. My roommate ran out of the house to see what the ruckus was. I told him and he said alright, let me make a call, and went into the house. 10 minutes later, cars started showing up at my place. About 30 or so gang members all congregated in my living room. Then most of them left. The handful that stayed behind stood guard at my house in pairs of 2. I even saw one of them patrolling outside carrying a katana. After a few days, the patrols stopped and I never asked the outcome of the situation, because honestly, I didn't want to know. But yeah, I was like I probably shouldn't hang out with these people anymore. This was one of the funniest things I've ever read. Thank you so much. I grew up in a small town and was, I guess, weird. The people I hung out with in middle and high school were from well-off, traditional 2-parent families with nice, new houses, white-collar jobs, multiple cars, etc. I'm the only child of a single mom, who worked a factory job. We lived paycheck to paycheck, beat a car, tiny, old house. I lived pretty far away from everyone, so I could only go to things if my mom could give me a ride. They stopped inviting me as much. Junior year prom, they'd talk about plans in front of me and then told me that I wasn't invited because they thought I had other plans. Senior year, I started dating a guy, and suddenly, there wasn't enough room at the lunch table. During a get-together, they were planning a trip to someone's family cabin and wanted $100 from everyone for alcohol. I got really quiet because there was no way in heck I could ask my mother for $100 for something so frivolous as underage drinking. That was what I was allowed to spend for back to school shopping. They went around the circle and I finally said that I didn't think I'd be able to afford it, and everyone basically stopped talking to me, turned their backs to me, and continued with their planning. Got a job at a bar restaurant down the street from my parents' house washing dishes when I was 18 and in school. Go in for my first day. At the time they told me to. Nobody is there. Head chef shows up an hour later. Gets me started. First half of day goes fairly well, then the second chef shows up around 3 PM. Stays 20 minutes, disappears. Day is progressing fairly normally, but I'm seeing disgusting things that make me never want to eat there again. Guys smoking cigs in the kitchen, not practicing sanitary food handling habits, stuff like that. But the moment I realized I shouldn't hang out with them came when the second chef showed back up around 6 PM waving around a decent sized bag of C and everybody was laughing and getting excited about divvying it up. He proceeds to grab a clean cutting board, divides out the bag evenly between everybody in the kitchen, me included, but I wanted nothing to do with it and got rid of it, and hands out little bags of Coke for each staff member. He then pulls out one of those little cash bags banks give you for storing deposits, and pulls out a much larger bag of Coke, grabs a scale from somewhere, and gets down to business. For the rest of my shift, approx 5 hours, anytime an order came in for a pizza with special cheese, at least one small bag of Coke would be placed under the pizza in the box. They were dealing Coke out of the kitchen. I finished my shift, left, and never went back, even to pick up my paycheck for my 12-hour shift. Frick that. The place was raided by police about 3 weeks later. TLDR, the restaurant I worked at for one day was dealing Coke out of the kitchen via pizza orders. Worked one day, quit, never went back for my paycheck. They were raided by police 3 weeks later. When I pulled out a test kit to make sure what we had was actually MDMA and they all called me a paranoid nerd. Excuse me for valuing my brain and my life and wanting to know what I'm putting in my body. Oh, and it turned red, which means it was primarily M or M based. But yeah, I'm paranoid. They told me to steal some gum from the gas station across the street from where we were at. I've done it hundreds of times, you won't get caught, I promise. Good thing you didn't. Fast track to a life of criminality. First you're stealing gum, then you're subjugating countries with your army of self-aware robot goats. When they were cheating on their spouses and just blamed it on the drugs, had a nonchalant what happens in Mexico stays in Mexico attitude. Late one night, 3 co-workers and I were out getting some food after our shift ended. This was a restaurant job, so we were out at 1 AM and eating at Waffle House. One friend went to the bathroom, then came back and told us how he had just smoked some crack. Something in my head snapped and I literally said, "You just smoked crack at 2 AM in a Waffle House bathroom? Dude, you really need to rethink your life choices. And I need to maybe rethink who I hang out with." Well, this is more of a person rather than people story, but she was a terrible driver. I took driver's ed with her and she drove in oncoming traffic. Fast forward to a month ago. She had her license and offered to drive me home from school. Managed to drive off-road and into oncoming traffic. I don't want to be in the same car as her again. The dude I was hanging out with invited me to a party. Everyone seems okay. A lot of dogs kicking around, but hey, it was a good time. After a while, the house owner of what in hindsight I assume was a crack den pulls out a hacksaw and threatens to kill my invitee over some dog related debt. Stopped taking his calls after that. Dang dogs. Came to college with no friends. Made friends with the guys on my hall. Hung out pretty much all the time. We would leave our doors open and just come and go. My roommate was from far away and didn't know anyone either, but was more charismatic than me. Over the next 2 years we become pretty decent friends. We don't have the same interests, but we got along well anyways. That was how it was with pretty much all the guys on the hall. Time comes to move out of the dorms and find a place to live for next year. Talk with my roommate about living together next year, and he said a friend from back home and him are going to live in an apartment together. Whatever, that's cool. Talk with 2 of my other friends and we talk about living together. Sounds good. Days later, I suggest we start looking online together for a place. They then proceed to tell me that they are going to be living in a house with my roommate, but there was an apartment in the basements for 2 and if I could find someone else to fill the spot, that is where I could live. Okay. Well, that was a bit dongish, but at least they gave me a place to stay. By this point most of the guys from the hall all had places to live, so I had to go out on a bit of a limb and ask a guy that had lived on the hall the previous year, and luckily he agrees to share the basement apartment. About a week later, I'm told that the deal with the house fell through and that nobody is sure what they are doing, but I should look for an apartment with a friend from last year. Fair enough. Another week passes. See a posting online for a 6-person house for a decent price. Perfect. Proceed to ask my roommate if they figured out what they were doing yet. He then proceeds to tell me that they already signed on to a 5-person house. The 5th person was the guy I was looking for an apartment with. I was furious. I excuse the fact that he didn't tell me about snagging the 2 initial friends, but then to proceed in silently taking the last person I had to live with when he knew that I had no other friends. Needless to say, I live alone now. That's balls, man. Frick those guys. Hope y'all've got some better friends now. For the fellow tokers out there, when they urge you to smoke more than you want to, like, come on man, just let me enjoy my high at my own pace. I don't have many friends. That is something I have understood and can readily accept. I have realized I am extremely selective in finding confidence in true, close friends, as I find it extremely hard to completely trust someone. Before that, however, I was on the fringes of the popular group and had many friends. I realized that these people never actually sought out for me. It was always me starting the conversations, me making plans to meet up, which they never actually bothered to follow through with, and they never even invited me to anything. So I stopped wasting my time and surrounded myself with people who actually want to be there. It's happening to me now. My group of friends is venturing past than the occasional smoke sesh to being high 24/7, along with the addition of a Xanax and alcohol mixture, which leaves them all unable to function. I probably need new friends. When I figured out everyone's hobbies were getting as drunk as possible, posting on social media about getting as drunk as possible, posting pictures on social media where everyone is a picture of you holding an alcoholic beverage, wanting to travel to other countries for the sole purpose of getting fricked up in them. The guys' only interests were sports and partying. The girls' only interests were shopping, popular media, and partying. Drugs. These people are fun to hang out with sometimes until you reach like 23, but then the basicness becomes pretty much unbearable. I know a guy like this. He recycles his group of friends every 2-3 years back to 22 years old because those around him grow up. It's like Vegas. Most people enjoy it, but no one wants to be there permanently. Fittingly, the guy I'm talking about lives in Vegas. We were standing in a dirty gas station bathroom sticking needles in our arms. In a sudden moment of clarity, I knew I wasn't gonna do this anymore. Interesting kitchen ornaments, I thought. Are those caricatures of slaves? Is that General Lee on their wall? Time to nope the frick out of here. If it is for General Lee, the Calf and Dukes of Hazzard and characters of Slave 1, Boba Fett's ship, I would allow it. When my roommate started dealing drugs out of our storage shed and I didn't have the slightest clue about it, that was a good indicator that I should immediately move out. I was in college at the time, as well as a giant pothead. I went to a dealer's house and suddenly I was living there a week later. It was fun and games until I woke up at 3 AM one day and went to ask for a cigarette from one of my roommates. I hear a bunch of voices coming from his bedroom, so I figured they were smoking some pot. I knocked. Someone freaked out and said, "Who is it?" Then I heard a scrambling. I answered and the same person said to go away. I was desperate for a cigarette, so I used a little trick on the handle to open it. I walked into a room of about 9 or 10 people, including every roommate and some other friends of mine, smoking M. It was like a hot box in there, as a cloud rolled out as soon as the door opened. For the month I had lived there, I was the only one that really slept at all. I moved out within a few hours and haven't talked to any of them since. I can't believe anyone living with them heads for an entire month and not realizing it. Edit forward. I used to go to church with my mom, aunt and cousin until I was about 13. I hated it but went because afterwards my mom rewarded me by taking me to Red Robin. Religion never stuck with me and I made no secret that I wasn't into the whole church scene. I'd have to go to the youth group where all of the kids went when the adults were in real church. The kids were freaking horrible and had a huge chip on their shoulder because they believed in God and I didn't, hence they were superior yet still bragged about giving BJs and smoking pot. I don't care if someone is religious or not, but what I can't stand is when someone talks the talk until they are blue in the face but can't live the ideals they preach. Even Red Robin wasn't worth hanging out with those losers. hanging around my thought she was best friend and a bunch of rich people she'd glommed onto at a party. Went into the next stall in the nightclub bathroom and heard my best friend talking to other girl in group, right? Did I tell you what a freaking loser Badrasian driver is? Or what? I knew you wouldn't believe me. In this situation I really wished you were the DD or something and just left without a word. Not even answered a text call from them. Joined a fraternity and tried to convince myself that there really were opportunities to network with alumni for the future, aside all the partying and binge drinking. Well, I was dead wrong. Apart from the few who had a future after college, these guys were losers. Couldn't talk to women without alcohol, abused drugs, hazed pledges, often got into fights with one another, and from time to time things would go missing. The day my GPA took a hit was the day I said no more. Although I never really took part in much of the partying, being around those guys was poison. I left the fraternity and only stayed in touch with a few brothers and decided to just focus on my future. I got 15 classes to go when I carried them to my apartment while they were hammered and puking. Next week leave me at a bar and tell me you were drunk and we didn't want to deal with that. Went to go visit some friends I hadn't seen in quite a few years, 10 plus, but stayed in touch with the advent of FB and the like. He made me and the friend I was with turn over our cell phones before entering, put them in a bowl by his door and took the batteries out. Walked into his house and he had about half a kilo of H and a few guns on his coffee table. Welp. Too bad this took off because this probably changed my life. I hung out with a group of 6-7 individuals in my high school and younger college days. These people were questionable and did some less than cool things, but I always looked the other way, even defending them at times. I thought that they had my back and we were friends. Well, one spring break, I flew down to Houston to spend it with my family. I come back home and while at the gym playing ball, a person I wouldn't call a friend but acquaintance calls me over and says that I need to watch who I hang out with. I asked him what was up and he said his house was robbed the week I was gone and some of those same guys I thought were my friends did it and said I was the driver. Told him I was out of the state and he said he wouldn't believe I would do that anyway, but he did want to alert me to who I was hanging out with at the time. I didn't even ask them anything. I just stopped hanging out with them. It sucked for a while, but eventually I knew I was better off without them and I can't imagine where I would have ended up had I not moved on. When she had her 4-year-old daughter trained to not grab the coffee table for support while falling, because she would frick up mommy's pile of coke. The kid would fall over but never reach out for support in fear of mommy's wrath. When I realized that I was self-harming because of the crappy way they made me feel about myself and that any scrap of approval I could gain from them I was lapping up like an abused puppy. Unfortunately, I didn't figure this out until I started hanging out with friends that actually made me feel happy. At my daughter's circle welcoming, sort of like a paganising ceremony, a newish friend got down on the floor with the kids to play with blocks. It was cute until he built what looked like 2 Jenga towers and flew toy planes into them, laughing hysterically. This was just days before the anniversary of the 11th of September. Everyone there was military or law enforcement. 2 people walked out so as not get into a fight with him since it was an important day. But man, once the guy left and the ceremony was over, did we get an earful. Never saw them again. Guy I knew said so he pee me off. That is why I killed his 2 cats and stuffed them in his mailbox. That was me noping the frick out of there. Frigging cat killing freak. When the group decided to talk crap about a suicidal girl saying she should commit suicide and didn't deserve to exist. Since then I haven't talked to a single person in that group and don't plan to. Having coffee with female friends who talk crap about their husbands the entire time. My family and husband are my life. I'm here to make the best of it, not sit around and complain non-stop. When the guy I had a crush on lured me over by saying he was lonely and then my group of friends that was there rubbed a plunger on me, shaved a chunk out of my hair, etc. for fun. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video. Bye for now.